Mr. Constitution, Douglas V. Gibbs here. Welcome to this video, and let's talk about Kari Lake. She is the gubernatorial candidate for Arizona, and she claims that Arizona is in the middle of an invasion. She's very critical of Biden's immigration policies. And if you're against unrestricted immigration into this country, then those who support such an idea claim that you are a hater, you hate immigrants, you are a racist and white nationalist, anti-immigration. That always seems to be the answer. And if you disagree with something, or if you consider a group or not acting in the best interest of the country, or believe that some moral boundary has been crossed, that you're a hater. You hate the people involved in the thing that you disagree with. So if you believe that illegal aliens should not be freely entering the country, you hate them, and you wish them to suffer. Among the arguments I receive as well is that to stand firm against unrestricted immigration is antithetical to what the Founding Fathers wanted. Now, we have been erroneously taught that the Founding Fathers embraced a very relaxed immigration policy because the country needed people, and for the opportunity to enjoy liberty, anyone and everyone was welcome. No restrictions. Statue of Liberty, after all, has engraved on it a poem that calls out to the world to come to America. Here's the poem. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame with conquering limbs, astride from land to land, here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor, the twin cities frame. Keep ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she, with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send to these, the homeless, tempest-tossed. To me, I lift my lamp beside the golden door. Except the Founding Fathers did not call for open borders. Their call went out to those who would assimilate to our values and adapt to Americanism. The Americans who established our Constitution feared swollen political parties filled with voters who did not even understand the American system. They expected respect for our heritage, our laws, our immigration policies. And as an immigrant, the person was expected to wave the American flag with pride, not wave their former country's flag, and then burn the red, white, and blue. Legal immigrants were widely accepted. But the founders recognized the dangers of foreign influence and the spreading of foreign political ideas within our borders. Alexander Hamilton called it the Grecian horse into our citadel of liberty and sovereignty, a reference to the Trojan horse. Benjamin Franklin commented the importation of foreigners into a country that has as many inhabitants as the present employments and provisions for subsistence will be in the end no increase of people unless the newcomers have more industry and frugality than the natives. And then they will provide more subsistence and increase in the country. But they will gradually eat the natives out. Hamilton argued that bringing in foreigners to fill up a vacancy was not necessary, for such vacancy will soon be filled by natural generation. He warned that letting anyone in would endanger the national spirit and the national character of America. James Madison, father of the Constitution, said, "It is no doubt very desirable that we should hold out as many inducements as possible for the worthy part of mankind to come to settle among us and throw their fortunes into a common lot with ours." In other words, we want to attract immigrants, but we want to make sure that they are people who are going to appreciate this land, that they're going to be a benefit to our land. Madison also explained that the purpose of immigration was not to swell the catalog of people, but to increase the wealth and strength of the community. Those who seek citizenship without adding to the strength or wealth of the community are not who we want. The Naturalization Act of 1790, the first official federal immigration law, called for restricting citizenship to free white persons of good character. Well, gosh, a friend of mine said not too long ago, it kind of sounds racist, don't it? You only want white people? Well, in today's society, the white person's part kind of makes us angry, kind of sets us back. How racist. Before we jump to conclusions, let's examine the reality of the time period. There were free blacks and black citizens in America. We know that some of the free blacks were citizens because 10 of the original 13 states, they allowed free blacks to vote. And, well, you had to be a citizen to vote. But free blacks in America understood liberty. They understood the American system. They had gone through the Revolution. They had established themselves in such a way as to be considered, for lack of a better way of saying it, productive members of society. But immigrants, persons of color from other countries, were not as established with education and the willingness to assimilate from the Founding Fathers' point of view. So people of color, white indentured servants, and women at that point were not included in the call for new immigration. This was the decision not because the founders were sexist or racist, but because the fledgling country needed the best and the brightest, those who would move America forward. And from their point of view, at the time, those people were educated European men with an established skill and trade already in place. Nothing personal. I suppose we could say it was all about establishing and improving the internal order and prosperity of the country. And based on the current realities of the time, free white Europeans were the ones with whose mindsets, attitudes, allegiances, skill set, they're the ones that had all of that. So regardless of the issues of immigration and slavery, the reality is that at the time, their stance on liberty and the internal improvement and growth of America was something to be admired. Frederick Douglass agreed. The former slave noted that despite what one saw on the surface, a majority of the Founding Fathers sought not to be radical abolitionists, but persons who believed in equality in God's eyes and the law and gradual emancipation. In the 1795 Immigration Act, a line requiring good moral character was added. The Founding Fathers wanted immigrants, but they wanted them to have good moral character. After all, only a virtuous society is capable of freedom, said Benjamin Franklin. The Constitution was designed, they say, to be a document that established liberty. But at the same time, it was not meant to be a suicide pact. Benjamin Franklin recognized that reality when it came to attracting immigrants. He noted that the Constitution will be much read and attended to in Europe, and if it should betray a great partiality to the rich, it will not only hurt us in the esteem of the most liberal and enlightened men there, but discourage the common people from removing to this country. On this amendment, he made the same point, stating he was not against a reasonable time, but should be very sorry to see anything like illiberality be inserted into the Constitution. It was a balancing act. The Founding Fathers did not desire unrestricted immigration, but as James Wilson of Pennsylvania, and an immigrant himself from Scotland, said, it was wrong to deprive the government of the talents, virtue, and abilities of such foreigners with rules that created discouragement and mortification. Balancing act. You got to find the middle. How do we attract the best immigrants without letting just the common folk that aren't going to add to this country in, but at the same time have rules that are too strict, that those who would be good for this country, those who would add to the character of the United States, that they would not be discouraged from coming here. George Mason agreed that there should be a wide door for immigrants. I mean, in 1782, the U.S. population was just over 2.7 million, according to that census. So some citizens proposed increasing population by inviting foreigners to settle in the United States. Hey, let's just let them all in. We'll increase the population that way. And Thomas Jefferson was firmly against using immigration by inviting foreigners by extraordinary encouragements as a means of increasing population. Jefferson was not against immigration for people who wanted to come to the United States on their own. Jefferson's belief was to allow population to increase naturally through its native stock and to continue to allow immigration at its natural pace. While Jefferson wasn't speaking against any particular group of immigrants flooding our shores, he knew that foreign allegiances and ideas could cause great upheavals. Jefferson questioned whether increasing population just for the sake of increasing population was a wise move for our young country. Jefferson espoused civilized values, the current Western ideals that the United States was founded upon, and that are currently under attack by terrorists, progressives, leftists, and globalists. Assimilate. Have those Western values was Jefferson's attitude. Donald J. Trump has stated a number of times that the southern border has been completely erased. We no longer have a border. Think of it. 2 years ago, we had the strongest border in the history of our country. We no longer have a border. Our country is being invaded. It's an invasion by millions of illegal aliens from all over the planet. Invasion, that word, it's become a common declaration by those who claim the United States is supposed to have a border and defend that border. The Center for Migration Studies has reported that an estimated 11 million illegal aliens comprised an in the shadows population residing in the United States. And some estimates by other sources reach as high as 45 million illegal aliens residing inside the United States. In the 2022 fiscal year, there were over 1 million encounters between federal enforcement and persons entering the United States illegally. In May of 2022, a record 239,416 illegal entrants were apprehended. Thousands of weapons, hundreds of millions of lethal doses of fentanyl, and an untold number of victims of human trafficking were seized. Meanwhile, in the states most affected, the crime rates are on an astronomically fast rise, as are the social welfare costs. The states and the country are experiencing costs that cannot be, to use one of their terms, sustained. Illegal immigration at these levels, these numbers, is unsustainable and will be a component for our eventual collapse if we allow it to continue. In 2019, Rush Limbaugh compared the illegal immigration problem to the World War II invasion of Europe. And I quote, this is Rush Limbaugh speaking, "Now numbers are hard to remember on the radio, and number of soldiers landed on the beaches at Normandy on D-Day, 129,710. By the time you add the paratroopers and the pilots of aircraft that were flying over, bombing, transport, all of the crew that were on the ships that crossed the channel, we're looking at a total of 150,000 Allied troops who were a part of the mission." Just to put this in perspective, yesterday officials from, and this is once again Rush Limbaugh speaking a few years ago, just to put this in perspective, yesterday officials from CPB Border Patrol announced that agents encountered more than 144,000 undocumented illegal aliens at the border in May. In 1 month, some might say, an invasion force similar to that which stormed the beaches at D-Day. Same number of people pretty much. Now, they're not armed. It's not a military invasion, obviously, but it is, nevertheless, an invasion. The left, after hearing Rush Limbaugh say that, said, well, you do realize in your scenario, if you want to make those comparisons, the United States is Nazi Germany. But that's beside the point. Now, Kari Lake, she's running for governor in Arizona. And she's a surprise to everybody. She beat the attempts to cause irregularities in the election. And if elected, she says, she will invoke Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution, declaring that an illegal alien crossing into her state is a part of an invasion, and that she will use all resources available to her, including the state militia and National Guard, to engage in war against the invasion. Article 1, Section 10 reads, the final clause states, "No state shall, without the consent of Congress, engage in war unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay." With the latest massive numbers of illegal aliens forcing their way into our country, I don't blame Kari Lake for proclaiming the onslaught is an invasion, and that she is willing to take such a drastic stance in standing up against the invasion. On June 30th, 2022, the United States Supreme Court, in a 5-4 ruling, confirmed for President Biden's administration the allowance to cancel the Remain in Mexico immigration policy that had originated in 2019 under the Trump administration. The policy required asylum seekers to remain out of country until their immigration hearings may determine if their plea for asylum was acceptable based on U.S. law. Opposition to the program called it cruel and un-American, forcing vulnerable populations to continue to be accessible to being extorted, kidnapped, or raped while awaiting for their hearings. One of the problems, it was argued, with tightening security at the border was only about 25 migrants were able to be processed each week, a number too low to handle the massive influx of people seeking to enter the United States. Why does everything have to be quick? Why does everything have to happen instantly? Why can't we have processes? Why can't we go through the processes to keep this country safe? The ruling by the Supreme Court signaled, it added more fuel to Joe Biden's fast approach to dismantling any policies that may impede migrational trends into the country. A policy that is being blamed for the massive uptick of unauthorized illegal alien crossings at the southern border of the United States. Challenges to the court decision and the president's policy stem around the fact that established federal law is not being followed. Instead, the Biden administration's discretionary actions are being permitted to be acted upon as if executive branch actions are authorized to violate existing law. The lawsuit that eventually recently ended up in the Supreme Court was triggered when on October 29th, 2021, the Biden administration issued an executive memo. It's like an executive order, but doesn't get numbered, to end the Trump-era policy. Rather than an executive order seeking a legislative solution, which, I think essentially was sending a message that President Biden's actions to exceed the rule of law or any laws that are on the books, the memo was preferable to an executive order because, memos receive less attention. And as I said earlier, they're not numbered like executive orders are. So the challenge was regarding if the Biden administration had legally followed the Administrative Procedure Act of 1946, which governs the process by which federal agencies develop, issue regulations, an act that also has been in the spotlight lately due to the use of it by the federal executive agencies to unconstitutionally make law under the guise of rulemaking. Remember, we have a separation of powers. Nothing is law unless it went through the legislative process. Executive orders, judicial decisions, those don't hold the power of law. Article 1, Section 1, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress. Legislative powers are the ability to make law, modify law, repeal law. Executive orders and judicial decisions and rulings and opinions don't carry those powers. Now, critics of strict attempts to curb illegal immigration calls policies like the Remain in Mexico rule unimaginably cruelty. The alternative is to either detain the illegal aliens until their case is settled, or allow them to reside in the country without a notice to appear in play. When the latter is provided, less than 5% appear in court. As for detention, currently the country does not have sufficient resources for those detention facilities, nor enough space in those detention facilities to house all of the persons awaiting a hearing. The answer then would be not to allow these persons to enter in the first place. Let them apply through an immigration process that is designed to only allow those into the country that would not be a drain on the system, or those who truly are refugees escaping dangerous conditions that fits our definitions for the need of asylum. The decision to cede the authority over immigration law and to establish uniform naturalization law to the federal government during the 1787 Constitutional Convention of Philadelphia included that doing such a thing was necessary for the protection and preservation of the Union, that it gave the federal government one of its tools it would need to fulfill Article 4, Section 4, which requires the United States to guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion. Founding fathers recognized, however, that a general government may not always live up to its responsibilities. There were fears that the federal government would consolidate and violate constitutional provisions. That is why in the beginning, As originally intended by the Constitution, there was nothing the federal government could do without direct or indirect approval by the state legislatures. If an authority was not enumerated in the Constitution, rather than just take up the issue on its own, the federal government may request the additional power by proposing an amendment congressionally, provided that 2/3 of each house agreed. Once proposed, it would require 3/4 of states to ratify it. Taxation was originally paid by the states, enabling the states to approve the federal budget before providing the funds for it that the federal government claimed it needed. Before the 17th Amendment, the states appointed the members of the U.S. Senate, giving the state legislatures oversight over the federal legislative process, final approval of treaties, and confirmation powers over any officers or judges nominated by the president. So even the election of the president was subject to state legislature oversight. According to Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution, the appointment of the electors for the presidential election was in the hands of the state legislatures. So if the federal government failed in its duties to protect the states from invasion or to properly administer immigration law, the states had every authority to detain illegal aliens inside their state and to, according to Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, act in defense in the face of invasion. So, now we get back to Kari Lake. Is Kari Lake correct? Is the southern border encroachment an invasion? I mean, we think of invasions as being by troops storming the beach or the countryside or a border. Tucker Carlson calls it an invasion, asking, and I quote, "Will anyone do anything to protect America this time? Or will leaders sit passively back as the invasion continues?" Unquote. Rush Limbaugh once explained, the objective is to dilute and eventually eliminate or erase what is known as the distinct, unique American culture. This is why people call this an invasion. Under the Biden administration, we are being overwhelmed by illegal aliens, just as we were during Obama's watch. And now, illegals are arriving from countries that are quite distant from us. Cuba, Venezuela, Ecuador, Haiti. Even Brazilians and persons from the Eastern Hemisphere are arriving at our doorstep. Meanwhile, Biden has explained that he is working to end the Trump administration's draconian policies, grounded in fear and racism. And as Biden has ended Trump's tough immigration policies, the Heritage Foundation has noted that the smugglers and traffickers got the message loud and clear and cranked up their business. Tucker Carlson recently concluded this illegal immigration is really destroying one culture and replacing it with a new foreign culture. And that, my friends, is exactly what an invasion is. A foreign culture subverting a country's established order and culture. Kari Lake told Major Garrett on CBS's Face the Nation that she would do what President Joe Biden's administration is failing to do to protect the citizens of her state. Well, of course, if you know the Constitution, you know that Article 4, Section 4 calls for the federal government to protect us from invasion, Lake said. And under Joe Biden's lack of leadership, she continued, we just aren't seeing that. We have an invasion at the border. The cartels, these narco-terrorist groups, have operational control, and they're using Arizona to smuggle people, to traffic children, and to traffic the most dangerous drug we've ever seen, fentanyl. And so we're going to invoke our Article 1, Section 10, basically, authority to take care of our own border and protect our own border. It's right there in black and white in the Constitution. And we meet all three criteria, she said. We have an invasion, our people are in imminent danger, and time is of the essence. There is no time for delay. The clause in the Constitution she's referring to, once again, I read it earlier, I'm going to read it again for you. Listen carefully. No state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty of tonnage, keep troops or ships of war in time of peace, enter into any agreement or compact with another state or with a foreign power, or engage in war unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. So we're going to have other states offer to help, said Kari Lake. I have already got a couple of other governors who are willing to help out, she said. And I know if you ask people in other states that are not border states, they deem this crisis on the border as one of the top issues facing our country, with so many young people dying of fentanyl poisoning right now. Lake also said that Arizona would act unilaterally if it had to, but that she expected aid from other states. Quote, "I believe we will get help," she said. "I have already talked to some other governors, and they're vowing to help us out wherever they can, because they realize what comes into Arizona, fentanyl, people coming here illegally, children being trafficked, doesn't stay in Arizona. Joe Biden's border policy is a failure. And Kari Lake, if she becomes governor of Arizona, has every authority to protect her state from invasion." So that is what we got to say about immigration. So is what we're facing an invasion? Because I've had people say, well, Doug, if you can allow a state just to call anything an invasion and go at it, you'll have states acting militarily all the time. We can't have that kind of stuff. Well, then what do we call it? The Founding Fathers obviously didn't want this intrusion. They feared foreign intrusion, foreign allegiance, divided loyalties, outside foreign ideas, poisoning our system. So what do we call it? What's next? Kari Lake is right to call it an invasion. She is right to understand that we have a problem here. And as governor of her state, she has every authority. You got to remember, the state militia really belongs to the state. And when the militia, National Guard or the state militia, is not called into action to the actual service of the United States by Congress, then the governor is the commander-in-chief. Locally, at the county level, the sheriff is. So if this is an invasion, and I believe it is indeed an invasion, Kari Lake has every right, every authority to say, hey, we're being invaded and I need to stop it. Besides, also, there is one other place that the federal government, the Biden administration, is violating the Constitution. In the Constitution, it says that the president shall faithfully execute the laws of the United States. By not executing immigration law as it is on the books throughout the country, is Biden not also violating that clause in the Constitution? I'm pro-immigration. I love immigration. My wife is an immigrant. She came here from Mexico. Her parents immigrated here when she was a child. Did it the right way. Went through the process. My father-in-law absolutely loved America. My wife, when called a quote-unquote Mexican-American, says, well, no, my dad didn't bring me here to be Mexican. He brought me here to be an American. And that should be the attitude of all immigrants. I'm here to be an American. And I'm here to make America better. And I'm going to put my best foot forward to do so. Unfortunately, as Trump was so criticized of saying when he was candidate Trump way back in 2016, that among those people who want to come into this country are rapists and murderers and criminals. And so I'll end this with this. When you leave your house, do you lock your door? You lock your door not because you hate everybody on the outside, but because you know that there are dangerous people on the outside who would love to break into your home. So you lock the door. And even when you're home and someone knocks on the door, you don't just throw it open and say, come on in. You vet them. You look through the peephole. You look around the edge of the door as you crack the door open. This country is our home. The border is our front door. I am more than happy to let you in. But you need to be beneficial to my country. I'm not just going to let anybody in. I'm not going to let somebody dangerous in. I'm not going to let somebody who's going to drag my house down in. All I ask is that when you come to the front door of my house at the border, you knock and you are vetted and you either accept being brought in or you accept the rejection. And if you really want to come to this country, you go through the processes that you need to go through to become a person that would be desirable as an immigrant to the greatest country on God's green earth. My name is Douglas V. Gibbs, Mr. Constitution. United we stand. Combined we kick butt. God bless America. My friends, God bless you. DouglasVGibbs.com. PoliticalPistachio.com. And don't forget to subscribe, not just to this channel. I've got 5 of them. I've got 2 YouTube channels. I've got a BitChute channel. I've got a Rumble channel. And I've got a Brighteon channel. Links should be below here. If not, just look up Douglas V. Gibbs, Mr. Constitution. Or go to DouglasVGibbs.com/video. Thank you for watching. Thank you for spending the time. We'll see you next time. God bless.